Hello everybody. So a very quick update on the valuation of Eli Lilly versus Novo Nordisk. This video entitled GLP-1 Wars, Who Wins as far as valuation goes. And I think picking between either here is a little difficult. It is a little difficult. Novo, of course, on traditional metrics looks much cheaper, but Novo is a little riskier. So, of course, these companies, they have an entire diabetes pipeline and they have other drugs, but for the purpose of this video, I'm focusing on the blockbuster drugs, which are the GLP-1 drugs, right? The weight loss drug, the first big success peptide, the GLP-1 peptide, glucagon-like peptide 1, as they call it. And there's really three kinds of peptide. And so, of course, you have Novo and you have Lilly's peptide. Novo is semaglutide, Lilly is tirzepatide. Tirzepatide right now is superior to semaglutide in all sorts of trials. It is also slightly more expensive. So people who want to get on a weight loss drug on the cheap right now, they tend to be choosing Novo. Novo also more successful perhaps outside of the US because it is the cheaper, the quote-unquote original GLP-1. Tirzepatide being more complicated. Tirzepatide is actually a GLP-1 2. It's two pathways. Not I put it one here, but it's actually two pathways. That's the main one they commercialize. So right now, essentially, the sales of Lilly are expected to be doing better than the sales of Novo because of that, because of the fact that it's the better quote unquote GLP-1. But moving forward, it's important to note that Lilly is pretty advanced in their CagriSema trial, which would be their GLP-1 2 with two action pathways for a weight loss drug. And when CagriSema gets approved, that should be a direct competitor to tirzepatide. So then they would be more on equal footing. But unfortunately, by the time CagriSema comes out, and they should be on equal footing on the dual pathway GLP-1, then it's widely expected that Lilly will have its triple pathway GLP-1 out, which is retatrutide. And if you follow the peptide space, you know that retatrutide has literally overtaken social media as probably one of the big blockbuster drugs that is upcoming. Many people now saying early 2027. Now, it's worth mentioning that Novo is also working on a triple pathway one, which is UBT251, but retatrutide is much more advanced within the FDA than Novo's product, which is lagging a little behind. So Novo has a lot of growth coming, but that growth may come later after Lilly. Lilly's growth is now, Novo's growth is probably a little later. But over the next 5 years, the growth of both of these companies may be more similar than most things. And if you look at Novo, so let's begin with Novo and Novo's valuation. Novo's valuation on my spreadsheet, even growth adjusted, even with an awful 6% next 12 months revenue growth, even with that, Novo still looks cheaper than a Lilly. Novo EV over GP over RG is a 0.65, so it's cheaper than Lilly. The rule of 40 is achieved with a 59, but you'll note that Novo is not cheap. 0.65 is not that cheap in my world. Now, if you don't do growth adjusted valuation metrics, if you just look at P ratio type metrics without taking into account growth, you will find Novo to be very cheap. Novo is trading at a 9.8 on a price to earnings ratio, so that's very cheap. It's trading at 3 times revenue, 6 times EBITDA. So Novo, super cheap. Novo also pays a 4% dividend. They also have a buyback. Think about the profitability. EBITDA margin profitability is 53%, so they're plowing quite a bit of money into their buyback. Worth noting also that Novo is investing a lot in capex, in manufacturing capacity for their GLP-1 peptides, investing notably in the US, but also in other parts of the world, building their manufacturing capability to transition to really a world where they used to sell a drug for, in the US, like, I don't know, $800 a month, to a world where they're going to sell it for like $150, $200 a month. So really ramping the volume and, working on making sure that these drugs actually become very much mass market, where, if you look at the estimates of people by 2030, some estimates go as high as saying that 1 American out of 3 will be on a GLP-1 by 2030. That's how some of these estimates are bullish. These drugs are very, very much needed. There is an obesity epidemic all over the world, really. It's not just in the US, right? But all over the world. And Novo, for some reason, is in the valley of despair. The stock is in the valley of despair because, like I said, they don't have tirzepatide, they have semaglutide. It's the older generation, and they're not going to have retatrutide just yet. So they're in the valley of despair, down 71%. But if you look at Novo's, for example, new pill, right? The oral GLP-1 that Novo's released, the early numbers are also pretty big. So they might actually see a jump in their revenue with their oral GLP-1 pill, which they sell at Hims and they sell through other platforms, because many people are still fearful of injections and don't really want to get anything injected. Now, the problem, of course, is that Lilly also has a pill. It's Fundayo is the pill of Lilly, but the pill of Lilly is quite different and it doesn't work through the same pathways. Lots of people are arguing Novo's pill is actually superior to Lilly's pill. In my view, Novo is a little bit behind, but it's not that much behind. And so the question is that, does it warrant that valuation difference, especially if you forget about growth adjustment? Does it warrant such a stark difference in, say, price to revenue, EV to revenue, right? You have Novo being 4 times cheaper on EV or divided by revenue. Does that warrant that? Novo, as it looks right now, probably looks like the better buy, probably a little oversold at 71% from the 2024 quote-unquote hype peak. I think Novo is arguably the risk-adjusted better buy and the better value, but nonetheless, it's worth mentioning both of these companies have experienced a spike in revenue. So I'll just show you Lilly's spike in revenue right here. You can see it right here. Lilly really tripling its revenue, near triple its revenue in no time. Actually, more than triple its revenue in next to no time. In about 3 years, they tripled the sales. Still predicted to grow 24% the next 12 months. Lilly, and so of course that's much more attractive from a growth standpoint. But because Lilly is that much more expensive, right? Lilly is a 1 trillion.09 company. Lilly is trading at an EV over GP over RG of 0.78. Rule of 40 is better at Lilly at a 71. I find Lilly a little more expensive. I'm also perhaps a little more concerned, I suppose, about the buyback that Lilly has on. 10.9 billion potentially going into buybacks in 2026 versus Novo's buyback program being much smaller and Novo much more focused on the dividend. That's not necessarily a good thing either. I would rather to see either of these companies reinvest in themselves. I think that's the most important thing. Novo's doing that. Lilly too. Lilly is also reinvesting a lot of money into itself, especially with their they got pretty vocal about that with their NVIDIA data centers and their NVIDIA GPU chips to develop new drugs. It's really tough to choose between these two. I would say Novo has a slight edge right now, but Novo is not the leader. So the question is, does one want to pay a little more just to get the leader? Also, Novo, one of the reasons I've historically been wary of Novo is, of course, Greenland and the fact that I think we're always close to another tariff scare. And of course, then Denmark could be a victim of a special tariff, and then you would have all of the Danish stocks drop. This is a concern that has manifested itself in the past, right? Namely in February of this year. So who knows if we're going to have more Greenland tensions? I would argue that could hurt Novo because you could have like a special tariff assess on anything related to Denmark. And even though Novo has a plant in the United States, the market doesn't do that deep of an analysis, and the market sells off this sort of stuff. Also, one could argue if one wants to exposure to the GLP-1, perhaps buying both of these and maybe a little Hims perhaps is a better bet than even buying this GLP-1 ETF, which are too spread out, right? There's a few GLP-1 ETFs out there actually that have picks that are too spread out in my view. I like both. I honestly like both. I think as far as valuation goes, Novo has a slight edge. So who wins? Novo, but not by a wide margin. This was not investment advice. This is not financial advice. This is only entertainment. I'm hoping you are entertained. Please like, please subscribe, follow me on Patreon, follow me on X. Thank you for watching, and have a wonderful, wonderful day.